Good morning and welcome to the Point. This week in Lansing, it was a chance for new legislators and some returning legislators to take the oath of office. Over in the House, they did it all together. And they did it knowing that there will be a new Speaker of the House. Earlier in the week, we sat down with Kevin Cotter, the new Speaker, to talk about his agenda and how he expects things to go in the next 2 years. Mr. Speaker, first of all, thanks for doing this. I want to start with pretty basic questions, but there may be some people in our audience who haven't met you yet, even though you've served for 4 years in the State House. Tell us a little bit about you, about your home region, 99th District, and kind of who you are. Who is the new Speaker of the House?
Yeah, no, I live just outside of Mount Pleasant. That's the area I was born and raised, and I've lived nearly all of my life in, and proud to represent all of Isabella County and much of Midland County. And over these last 4 years that I've served, I've had the opportunity to really get into a lot of different areas. I started out on the Appropriations Committee, and then this last term served on policy committees. And I think that there are a lot of ways in the legislature to represent your district, whether that be on the appropriations side or the policy side. All of the issues affect all of the people in this state, and I have an area that I'm proud to represent. We're the home to Central Michigan University. It's an area where you have a city in the middle of the district, but then a lot of rural area on the outskirts of the city and in the county, and so it's a very diverse district and a lot of different needs and a lot of different types of people. And this has just been an incredible experience to represent a little over 90,000 people, as all of us do.
Almost a bit of a microcosm when you talk about a city within your district, because much of the state obviously is made up of urban areas, and while that is not a big city, it certainly is a concentration of people and a lot of rural areas around it. It does kind of give you the broad stroke of what you're dealing with when it comes to the state of Michigan. Now, as the Speaker of the House, representing all the people, as to some degree all 110 members do, but particularly as Speaker, what do you see as the most pressing needs when you talk to your caucus? Because when you're talking to some of your members from the far north part of the state versus the people from southeast or southwest, they could have different views.
And they certainly do. We have a large caucus this term. We're going to have 63 members just in the House Republican caucus, not to mention 47 Democratic members, 110 members, and some very diverse districts. But I think we can find areas of overlap. You look within the House Republican caucus, there's a lot of overlap in the way of being fiscally responsible. That covers so much, just looking at the budget. We have the state budget of over $52 billion a year we're making spending decisions on. Now, some of that, a good portion of that is money that we don't have influence over because it's restricted or federal dollars, but a lot of money that's spent by the state each year that we have a lot of influence over. And looking at the debt that a state carries, that's one thing that just really blew me away when I first took office, because we know that our state is required to pass balanced budgets each year, but then you get here to find that we were over $50 billion in debt. How does that happen? And so we've made some big steps to that end, but that's just another example of an area that really gets broad appeal in paying down the debt and just being smart with money like all families have to.
You mentioned 110 members. We're in the Speaker's library, and you can't see it in our shot, but right above us are the picture of several of the most recent Speakers of the House. I won't tell you which one, but one of those up there referred to trying to keep control of the 110 down there as herding minnows in trying to keep that group together. I mean, it is difficult because it's not just that you have X amount of Republicans and X amount of Democrats. You've got 110 different individuals with individual ideas that don't always vote along party lines. What is it like when you start to tackle a $52 billion budget when maybe only 10 or 11 billion of that is actually money that you can get your hands on when it comes to actual, general fund money, not the K through 12 money or not the federal pass-through money, when maybe a fifth of that entire budget is all you really control directly?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's the first time I've heard herding minnows, but one that I would share, and both are very accurate, I think. My predecessor, Speaker Bolger, often would use the line that's like trying to put frogs in a wheelbarrow. And that's totally true. When you look at a big item such as the budget, or you look at this road funding plan that we just put together, the frogs in the wheelbarrow analogy is one that you make a change to get one more in, and a couple jump out. So I think they're both very accurate. But it's a matter of really having patience, I think. You need to be patient and listen to all, and you're never going to please everybody. But I think one phrase that's popular in this town is that, the perfect is the enemy of the good. If we're going to govern, we have to take action, even when it takes us outside of our comfort zone.
When you say the perfect is the enemy of the good, it certainly applies to the deal you just mentioned, and that talks about road funding. And I know over in the Romney building, the governor had a much different idea about what the outcome might have been and was pretty vocal about it. But as we got into the late hours of the lame duck session, it became pretty clear that his idea was not going to happen. You weren't just going to get a clean bill that said we're going to raise the gasoline tax, and it wasn't going to be an either or vote. And it came to be something that was really not what was discussed in the beginning, at least by many. I don't know what you guys were talking about behind closed doors, but for those of us who were observing and consuming, tell me what you think of that deal in the overall, and how much does that put you as a new speaker, let me say, how much does it put you on pause until that May election? In other words, how much of your agenda may have to be put on hold until you find out exactly what's going to happen with the voters when they go to the polls in May?
Yeah, to the first part of the question, I do support the plan. And I think this is a perfect example of the perfect is the enemy of the good. I think if you take the 149 people that had a say in that plan, 148 legislators plus our governor, I can say with certainty that not one of them would point to the plan that we passed and say that's the perfect solution. There had to be give and take, across chambers, across political party, and in the end, I think that's really what made this a good plan. Was all of us were forced to go outside of our comfort zone to get this plan done. And so, with that, you have to say, okay, am I going to just say no if I don't get my way, or am I going to realize that part of being in the majority is realizing that we have an obligation, a duty to govern. And that's what we did here. We've been spending, now years looking at road funding. And are we going to act, or are we going to allow this problem just to continue to get worse? And so that's a perfect example of going outside of your comfort zone, but realizing that you have to do that, to address big issues. And I think that I can point to several issues that we've tackled where that's been the case.
When you talk about going outside your comfort zone, you also went outside the zone of making the final determination, because you left this up to the voters of the state of Michigan. More than a few people have been critical about that, saying, wait a minute, we got 110 of you down there, we got 38 of you down here, that's what we sent you to Lansing for. Do you think it serves the people of the state well to put this issue back in front of them, understanding part of it's constitutional and has to go in front of them, but knowing too that might have been avoided, taking a different route? Is this something that is so big that it ought to be up to the people rather than just the elected officials?
And I think for me, it wasn't about making the decision whether or not this had to go before the people to address a big issue, but rather, as you indicated, because we wanted in the end to make a change to the sales tax, I think that's a protection that the voters left for themselves. When we last amended the Constitution under Proposal A, going back to the early 90s, to say that we're going to increase the state sales tax from 4% to 6%, that cap was very intentional. And it requires, really as a check and balance, it requires a vote of the people to raise it from there. And so as I listened to people in my district, there was not a popular solution as to how you're going to tackle a problem of this size, $1.2 billion a year. But so often as we would have the discussion and say, okay, we have to pick something. What option are we going to pick? Is it the gasoline tax, the plan that would take us to the highest taxes on fuel in the nation? Is it increased registration fees? Or is it increased sales tax? Is it spending reductions? The popular response that I heard in my district was, look at the sales tax. And I agree, it's a better system of tax. We have an opportunity here where we can move to more of a consumption-based tax in the way of a sales tax, and that could set up a later discussion about looking at the income tax. It's something that I would really like to look at, but I'm sharing caution right now. A lot of people want to have that conversation right now. I think the responsible way to go about this is to get past May. We have to make sure that the roads are adequately funded. That is an absolute priority in state government. That's a big part of our responsibility. And so I think we just have to be responsible about it. And I think that's part of being fiscally responsible, is not just slashing taxes every time you have an opportunity. That's not what being conservative is all about. It's about being responsible.
I want to talk to you about both those things. I do want to have that conversation about income tax and also about conservatism, but first I want to have this conversation. Lame duck. I've been in this building at 4 o'clock in the morning more times than I would have ever predicted when I walked in here 20 years ago, because lame duck, and some other times, but lame duck has been that session that lends itself to those all-night sessions where, oh, we need one more vote. Let's go back down to the House and see if we can pass somebody's pet project down there to get a vote down in the Senate, which, by the way, is exactly what happened in this last session, from my estimation, is how you got that tax deal done. But without regard to that particular vote or this particular session, is lame duck a good way, a good time, and a good place to make important policy decisions when you got some of the people with one foot out the door and other people that have got one foot into the hotel room or into the bedroom because they're just about exhausted from being here for 35 hours in a row?
You know, unfortunately, I think lame duck is a necessary evil. You look at some of the big issues we've tackled. I think road funding is a perfect example. I mean, that has been squarely before the legislature for the last 3 years. It's been a problem much longer, you know, going way back before then. But, you know, Governor Snyder laid this out, you know, very clearly in his State of the State address in 2012. And we've been grappling with it ever since. And I think that ultimately, lame duck is a necessary evil. Now, I don't think lame duck needs to be as bad as it is. It seems there's a lot of volume of bills, things that, you know, maybe could have gotten done earlier in the year. I don't want to pass judgment on that because I haven't been in this position for a lame duck session yet, but I have to tell you, going back to last session, I had what I thought may be my longest day in the legislature. That was 26 hours from the time I got up until I went to bed, and this session we passed it by an hour, and it was a 27-hour day. But I'm going to make it an effort to the extent that we can, you know, clear the agenda earlier on of a lot of the bills that don't have to wait and see if we can get there. But, you know, at the same time, too, you look at road funding, and once we finally struck a deal, it takes a long time to draft those bills. And so whether we're sitting around doing nothing or voting on other issues, we have to be here either way.
One of the live shots I did from just across the hall during that session, I pointed out that it takes a long time to draft them, and we'd been there for hours already. But then you are talking about changing the Constitution on top of everything else, so you kind of would like to get it right if you're going to do it, which is one of the issues. We're back with more from the new Speaker of the Michigan House. Next, To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. Representative Kevin Cotter is the new Speaker of the Michigan House of Representatives. We sat down with him this week to talk about what he expects and what he would like to accomplish over the next 2 years. One of the other issues that you brought up a moment ago is talking about what it means to be conservative. From the moment this election ended, from about 8:02 in the evening, people started saying, well, look, this is going to be a lot more conservative legislature. It's going to be a lot more conservative in the Senate with the Senate Majority Leader Meekov, and it's going to be a lot more conservative down in the House. Is that your take, that this incarnation of the state legislature is conservative, more conservative than the one just passed? Or is that a perception that guys like me and the media like to talk about a lot?
No, I think it's a very fair question. I have to say I've gotten that question has been asked of me more times than what I think of the road plan. But, you know, I think it's a very fair question. And I think that, you know, we could make some assumptions about the makeup of the next legislature, specifically the next House. But I'm really restraining myself and saying, you know, let's not pass judgment too early. Let's allow folks to, you know, be officially sworn in this Wednesday and then have our first day of session, and then as we get into the coming weeks, cast some votes, and we'll see where it goes. But I'm not going to step into the you know, the analyzing or prediction as to whether or not we'll be more conservative or not. But certainly that potential exists.
Well, does your election of Speaker signal a more conservative group of people?
You know, I think it could. I think it could. I've certainly been right of center in our caucus, and you know, it could. I don't know. There's a lot of factors that go into that, and it's a very long, exhausting process, but very fortunate the way things worked out, and I look forward to the responsibilities that I have of these next 2 years, and just look forward to carrying those out to the best of my ability.
As we sit here, as you accurately pointed out, you're ready to start session. That will begin, but by the time this airs, we'll be to the weekend. You'll have a couple of days under your belt. We'll be waiting for the governor's State of the State. So I want to come back and talk about your hopes, your agenda for the coming year. But first, I want to talk about something else you brought up, and that is the income tax. My supposition is, and has always been, that if you ask 70% of the people watching this program right now, they would have a hard time telling you what percentage they're paying in state income tax. It's one of those numbers that frightens politicians greatly. I was here when they tried to raise the income tax, when in fact they did, and the vast majority of people had no idea what that percentage rate was. There is a push among some of the folks in your caucus and elsewhere to take the income tax rate to 3.9%, which is what had been promised some years ago. It had been halted. We can go through all of the history of it. but we're at 4.25, right?
Correct.
And some would like to take that back to 3.9%. The governor talked about that on Inauguration Day. He said, A, it's a good idea. He likes to lower taxes. B, it's a bad time because he says that there are tax credits that are coming due and other obligations, including, I think you mentioned a moment ago, some of the debt that the state owes. He didn't seem too optimistic about that prospect. You said you have to wait until May. Do you try to take that up after May?
You know, possibly, depending on what the numbers show. And so I mentioned, you know, the election in May regarding the sales tax for road funding. But I think a couple other things that are going to happen between now and then. Really 3 separate events. We have 2 revenue estimating conferences. So it's important that we get up-to-date information about where the state's at financially and where the economists say that the state's going to be going, what kind of revenue we can expect to have to work with. But we also have to do some very important budget work during that time, which we will be doing. I expect probably sometime in early February the governor will put out his, that's just my assumption, I haven't heard an official date yet. He'll put out his budget plan and then we'll do some work in the Appropriations Committee to work through the budget. So I just think that we have to be responsible about it. You know, it'd be I think premature to say that we are certainly, you know, we're definitely going to pursue a reduction in the income tax rate at this point.
Well, on Wednesday, as this airs, it will have already happened, but the 110 members will have been sworn in. You will have gavelled in. You will have started talking about agendas. Of course, the governor has his State of the State coming up in the coming week, so we'll wait to see exactly what he has on his plate. We know that some of that's going to be job training, job development, matching skills with jobs. He's already talked some about that. But as Speaker of the House, what is your agenda in regard to getting your chamber moving along as early as possible? Obviously, the budgetary process will be very early, but what is something you would like to, or what are some of the things you would like to achieve over the next 2 years?
We started this process even before the end of this last year. You know, toward the tail end of last session, we started looking to, you know, what do we want to tackle as a caucus? And we use a process here in the House Republican Caucus, what we call our Policy Development Work Group. And we put together a document, so it's being very transparent about where we want to go. And we're following that same process again. This last session I chaired it. It was a tremendous opportunity to work with all of our members to find out where they want to go. And we're going to follow that again this term. We're already well into this process of having a lot of in-depth conversations about policy to find where do we have the critical mass of support to elevate an idea into a caucus priority. Well, we're going to put that all out. We're going to publish this. We'll put it out, make it available to the public via the internet. And then we go back and we update it as items are accomplished. And we'll do that in early February. And so I think that that's important because in order to have true accountability, we have to be transparent. If we have true transparency, the public can then hold us accountable. It's a process that's worked very well for us these last 2 years. And so I'm being cautious at this point. I don't want to get out in front of the caucus. I view my position as Speaker not as one to come in with an individual's agenda and say, here's the agenda we're going to drive. I really see my job is being the captain of the ship. We're together collectively going to chart the course. And then it's my job to drive the ship and you know, work in tandem with the caucus members. So at this point, it's not about individual priorities, but it's about an ongoing process of what the caucus priorities will be.
I know it's hard to tell, as we say, we're just getting started, but as you captain that ship, as you drive that ship, as you say, what does it take to get to 56? Does it take working closely with your caucus in that document, or is it going to take working with your caucus and across the aisle with Democrats as well?
All of the above. You know, it varies by the issue. Sometimes, you know, there are the votes internally within the caucus. We have, you know, a unique situation here. And I go back to, you know, 4 years ago when my class came in, we came in with the governor and it was a wave election. Republicans went from 43 to 63 members. I found out the next term how fortunate we were to have 63 because we were 7 votes, 7 members above what is needed to pass a bill at 56. Well, and then after President Obama's re-election year in 2012, we lost 4 seats. And I can tell you there's a world of difference between 63 and 59. But, you know, we've been blessed, I feel, to come back at 63 again this term. And, you know, that gives us that cushion where we have, you know, there doesn't have to be unanimous support within the caucus to get something done. And, you know, I think that's really a testament to, for me, it's evidence of where the voters are at and saying, okay, we've made some huge decisions, some tough decisions over these last 4 years. And the public has now sent us back at 63, which is the same number we started with. To me, that tells me that the public is willing to support those that cast tough votes. And so we'll do some of that internally, but there will also be times where it's bipartisan solutions. Look at the road plan. That would not have happened but for bipartisan cooperation. And so we'll certainly have those situations as well as next session.
Let's talk about that very thing, that majority that you come back with, not just in the House, but 27 in the Senate. That's not happened since I've been around here. Republicans control the House by big numbers, the Senate by overwhelming numbers, the governor's office, Secretary of State, Attorney General, Supreme Court. You're in control of everything as far as you can see. How much pressure does that put on the Republican Party and elected Republican officials to get it done, whatever it is?
You know, I mean, you could look at that and say there's pressure, but for me and for my class, that's all we've ever known. You know, we're so fortunate to have only served in majority. And I think about that a lot. And, you know, the class that just left, Speaker Bolger, all of his classmates, they served their first term in the minority. And while I've never been there, I heard loud and clear from them the tales of past and what that experience was like. And so one thing that I'm going to continue to do this session is to continue to reiterate that point to my caucus members and say, while I can't speak from firsthand accounts, I can tell you that we don't want to go back. We don't want to be back in the minority. And we have to remain conscious of that. And really, you know, majority is, with it come so many positives, but at the same time come responsibilities. I mentioned that earlier, the responsibility to govern. I think to the extent that we stop governing, that we stop tackling big issues, the public is going to see that and they're going to respond. And so we have to be accountable. We have to realize the responsibilities that have been given to us, and in the time that we take our eye off the ball is the time we're going to lose majority.
To the degree that I get the opportunity in just short of 2 years, I would like to sit back down with you and ask you the same question, so here goes. As we get ready to go into this session, categorize, to the degree that you are comfortable, your relationship with the Senate Majority Leader and with the governor.
You know, very positive, very positive. You know, Senator Meekhoff, now Senate Majority Leader Meekhoff, we've had nothing but positive interactions. He's been one that, frankly, to this point, I haven't had a lot of interaction with. He was the floor leader, and I was, you know, at a junior level leadership position in the House, but we didn't interact a lot. But I've had nothing but positive experiences with him, and look forward to, you know, he's going to be my legislative partner. And looking at the governor, I've had probably more interaction with, and it's been very positive. It's always been positive even when we've disagreed, and that's one thing that I've really appreciated. I like that he likes to tackle big issues. He's not one that probably excels at the political side of things, and that's a good thing. I see that as a very good thing, because I don't either. You know, he likes to be around a conference table, you know, around a conference table tackling big issues and solving big problems, and not spending time traveling the state, you know, touting the successes. And so I appreciate that. We've been on the same side of some issues, and we've been on the opposite sides of others, but even when we've disagreed, it's been productive and it's been professional. And I think that that's key in you know, both of our roles, is while we may disagree on one issue, you know, we don't sever that relationship, because we're going to need each other on the next one.
We're back with more To the Point in just a moment. So the new legislature is ready to get down to business in Lansing, but it won't happen just yet. In our conversation with the speaker this morning, you heard part of the reason. One is the state of the state. That will be the governor's plan for the coming year, will be delivered this coming week. And then on February 11th, we expect the governor to roll out his budget. Those two items will have a big impact on where the Republican-controlled legislature goes. But it's not just those two items. Perhaps the biggest holdup in the legislature this year could be the May election. That May election, when you will be asked to decide how and or if you want to raise taxes to pay for road work. Until that's decided, it may be a bit difficult for both the House and Senate to decide exactly how they will appropriate tax funds. Anyway, we'll keep an eye on that, and also keep a close eye on exactly what those new representatives over in the House want to do. As you heard the conversation this morning, there is a lot of talk about rolling back the income tax rate to 3.9%. But again, will any of that be dealt with before that May election? Join us here as we'll talk about it every Sunday morning at 10 o'clock on Wood TV 8 for To the Point.